thank you all for coming and joining this conversation. We're excited to share with you. We changed the title. It's still a mouthful, and we did use ChatGPT to try to simplify it. Here we are. But thank you so much for coming. This is a collaboration that we're really excited to talk about and share with you. So let's get into it. So I'm Molly, and I am a service designer.
And I'm Kate, and I am not.
And I mean, do you know what service design is?
No, not really. And I've been working with Molly for 5 years, and when people ask me why I'm working with this design firm, admittedly, I still can't really say why exactly, except that it works.
And this was part of why we wanted to have this conversation here, because I think there's a lot of, talking to other folks who really understand the language. And this relationship has been one of really getting to know each other's language. I do not speak lawyer, and I still do not speak lawyer. And even in preparing for this presentation, we've had to do a lot of translation back and forth. Most of my career has been in the private sector, working in innovation and service design for companies like Adidas, and working in energy and working in financial services. And while I was doing that, my younger sister, who is a colleague of Kate's, was going to law school and deciding to focus and spend her energy on advocating for youth and youth justice. And I watched her struggle, and I also watched and admired her commitment and her passion. And it did, start to turn up in me, just this question of what it might mean to actually do the work that I was doing with less of a focus on profit.
And I'm here, like David shared, I'm an attorney, and I focus on young people impacted by commercial sexual exploitation or sex trafficking. I came into this work because of a young girl. She was 16 at the time. My colleague was representing her. She was incarcerated, so sitting in juvenile hall, basically a kid's jail. And we were trying to get her access to mental health services so she could be in the community and not in a hall setting. And on a particularly difficult day after court, she said to my colleague, I and every other girl sitting in this juvenile hall is in here on a prostitution-related charge. Do something about it. And that really opened our eyes to the fact that there were kids being bought and sold in our community in Oakland, across California, across the United States, across the world. And we needed to do something about it. And that systems were failing them by virtue of the fact that she was sitting behind bars and was being punished for something done to her. She was a victim of crime, but somehow she was being punished and criminalized. It was just something that was completely counter to our understanding of justice. And so I was able to join the National Center for Youth Law. It's a nonprofit legal organization that serves young people and families impacted by systems. When I say systems, I'm talking about public systems like the child welfare system that serves abused and neglected children, the juvenile justice system, when young people get in trouble, the education system, kind of any system that impacts children and youth. The National Center for Youth Law has been around for 50 years doing this work, and 15 years ago, we established this team to better identify and support young people who have been impacted by exploitation or vulnerable to exploitation. And we do that, we have a few guiding principles. We really try to center young people. We don't purport to be the experts in their experience. Certainly we have folks on our team that have lived experience that inform our work, and they're far away from their exploitation. They are not living it in the moment. And so it's so very important as we're trying to do systemic change, not direct service per se, but change systems, that we're really grounding it in their experience. We also bring people together. Not one system or organization can support these young people and meet all of the myriad of their needs. And we also build awareness. I don't know how many of you know about this issue. You may think that young people might be choosing this. You may not understand that someone recruited them or is forcing them. You may not understand that a young person may have to trade sex to meet their basic needs. So it's really important for us to be bringing awareness to this issue as well. And we try to do all of our work by changing laws, leading coalitions, doing independent research to build the knowledge base. But it's complicated and complex. This issue's hard to stomach. Like over a glass of wine or having a beer, people don't want to think about this. You don't want to talk about it. Like I said, young people are stigmatized and misunderstood. We think that we need to lock them up to keep them safe and keep them out of harm's way, without considering the harms of what a juvenile detention setting does to young people. And because of their experience, they're having to interact with all these systems. It's not that they want to, like I described that young woman, kind of rewinding a bit in her experience. The juvenile justice system and her criminalization is kind of like the end point where we got in contact with her. Fast forward, like her mom had substance use issues that couldn't get addressed by the public health system. As a result, she was missing school. And the education system called the child welfare system. The child welfare system said, we got to remove this kid. Her mom can't take care of her. And when she was put in a group home, that's when she was recruited by a sex trafficker. So many systems, so many organizations. And yet, all of those systems have their own charges, their own roles and responsibilities. And while they may be focused on a young person, like the child welfare system, the system isn't really necessarily designed to elicit information from that young person about what they want, what they need, what's working, what their goals are. So there's a lot of misalignment. And so we needed to do something about that. And so, God, I'm clumsy. So we, through our work and through like the 15 years that I've been at the National Center for, near 15 years that I've been at the National Center for Youth Law, one of our longest standing collaborations and kind of deep engagement has been in Los Angeles County. It's the largest county in the country in the United States, serves a ton of different youth, and unfortunately it also happens to be a hub of sex trafficking in the United States. We've learned a whole lot through our deep engagement. We've collaborated with a lot of systems. We've developed innovative protocols and practices. We've formed youth advisory groups. And we wanted that to translate into other places. Like I said, we've been there and been engaged with LA County for 10 years. But my colleagues and I can't go to every community across the country or come into different countries and do that same deep work. And we also don't want to be gatekeepers to what we learned and what we know. And so we kind of settled on an idea that we should develop a toolkit. But when like a lawyer says we should develop a toolkit, we're thinking we got to write down every single thing we did in very detailed format. And so we were like, let's do a toolkit, and then we'll maybe talk to a designer and they'll make it pretty. That's when Molly came in.
That's when we came in, and I'm sure as I was when I first started talking to Kate and my sister May about the possibility of this collaboration, that you might feel a little bit overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge, and we weren't sure that we really could help as service designers. There was such a great talk this morning by KA about the importance of humility, and I was so thrilled to see that, because that's really at the center of the relationship that we built, which was to bring service design in without it being a service design problem to solve. To bring in the skill, to bring in the deep listening, the openness, right? The ability to come in and process a lot and sense make, but for it not to be the time or the place for us to be the experts in this very complex and significant, challenging issue.
Yeah.
Issue, thanks. So we did. So we went in, we would like to try this out. And again, this was my studio's first opportunity to take on a collaboration like this. And so we really approached it with the sense of exploration. How can we develop this relationship and be of value?
And to be clear, it was incredibly frustrating for Molly at first.
And for Kate.
And for me. Because we wanted it to go quickly. We wanted to be focused on how we can make impact for young people. And I wanted things to move more quickly, and I wanted an agenda, and I wanted everything to be very structured. And that is, I'm learning, is not the way you all work.
I told her not to insult everybody.
But I've now developed a 5-year relationship with her.
It's a different level.
Yeah.
It's a different level. It's true, and this was kind of the back and forth. We did come around to feeling really good about the value we brought to the table as service designers, and so this is a story about that potential value, right? And we do want to, with humility, encourage folks in the service design field to go for this. Because there is value. And so we're going to spend the rest of the presentation talking about that value and then offer you a way to start to get involved. So highest level was really discovering that there was so much, and I'm talking about so much, like 500 pages, stacks of lawyer stuff that we looked at and thought, okay, what does it mean to take 10 years worth of stuff and make it usable, right? And so it really was a process of making the invisible visible, a lot of things that were invisible. As Kate mentioned, this is really central to what the National Center of Youth Law, NCYL, does, is to put youth at the center. And so when you're looking at stacks and stacks of paperwork, you don't really feel that, right? So how do we take their experience, as experts in this change-making process, but also the actual lived experience of the youth that they work with regularly, and how do we put them first? As we develop this toolkit, how do we format around their stories, use non-extractive design, and yes, include them in this process, gather and integrate their feedback so that they are actually empowered by this toolkit as well.
And so that when someone else picks it up, they understand it's not just about changing the law. It's not just about going in and legislating. It's about what does the young person want and need. How is their family going to be impacted? Are there unintended consequences? It has to be at the center. And, that's not, I'm not going to write a long document and have that as a bullet point. Molly and her team were so helpful at talking about how, placement of things and also just how to frame. Let's come up with a visual. And, we would never have come up with any of these things. It's very helpful.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
We also made collaboration visible. So this is a team that, their expertise is also in collaborative action, right? But again, the way that they were telling the story didn't actually invite folks in to participate. So this was a process of making collaboration visible as well, turning all of their successes and challenges, I should say, into best practices and watch-outs, turning many, many lists, lists with many, many sub-bullet points of information into tools. And I love this quote by Hillary Cottom that, this is really the way we, enable different types of conversation and conversing and really open up pathways for folks to participate. They were using this toolkit to actually reach a lot of different types of collaborators. So we're talking about public agencies, advocacy groups, other nonprofits, So we had to really use the service design tools to find those pathways, make sure that folks could engage in the ways that were going to be quick and accessible to them. And then, of course, as you would expect, all of that systemic stuff that Kate was talking about at the beginning, making that visual, making that something people could access, really understanding their intercept opportunities depending on which parts of the system they were sitting close to, and where they felt like they could jump in. So this was from a service designer's perspective, one that was very nervous to get into this space. Felt really good. Felt good to kind of have this moment of like, we did it. This really was helpful. But I think as we've gone on, the thing that we've been celebrating more is the ability that the outcome of this project was really to make the relationship, again, the potential relationship between service design and nonprofit, in spite of the fact that Kate still doesn't know what it is, more visible. So what did that really mean? We saw more of, as you've kind of heard, the exchange value, what we were each getting out of doing this work, and then, of course, the way in which that would ultimately benefit the youth. Yeah. And we were invited into more places in their organization. So we were invited to develop other toolkits for other teams. We were invited to collaborate with Kate's team on strategic planning for LA County. We've been invited to actually work on strategic planning work for the executive director of the organization. And again, this is not because we sold service design, but because we showed up as a partnership in support and made the service design sort of approach and skills available.
And it wasn't, like just going back to what Kay was talking about and what Molly touched on, it was also the way the team came in. They didn't come in as experts. Molly had some sense of the issue just through her sister May, but not a deep understanding of what we were trying to accomplish, why we were trying to accomplish it, the complexities of what the young people were facing. So I think that also transformed our relationship and made me want to advocate for her involvement in our work, in our organization, and also has made me recognize truly, that this ought to be involved in more spaces because, we've done kind of business as usual at our nonprofit. And we do things a certain way. We're lawyers, this is how we advocate, we, sue people to enforce rights, or we come in and partner with government, and we do it slowly. And when we're doing it slowly, we can't help as many young people, and we can't make the impact we want to make. And so we're hoping that some of these tools that we'll talk about in just a moment would be helpful for you all as you're thinking about exploring partnerships with nonprofits.
Yeah, so we want to sort of extend now the thinking to beyond just our great relationship, how you might, as a service designer, or if you're on the nonprofit side, think about the opportunities for this type of collaboration. What is the language that Kate would use for the opportunity? And then what's the language we would use for the opportunity? Because we still don't speak the same language, but we're able to now translate back and forth.
With lots of questions.
With lots of questions in between. There are over 1.5 million nonprofits in the US alone. That's a lot of opportunity for collaboration with service designers and then across, right? And so we're really hoping that as we talk through the next few slides, that you will start to tap into your desire to maybe reach out and start thinking about this, something you could take on.
Okay, so first thing you should know, if you don't already know it, funders are in the driver's seats for nonprofits. They tell us what outcomes they want to see, what metrics they want to see. Philanthropic foundations tell us, government contracts tell us, and some we have better relationships with and we can push back, but ultimately they are driving. And so that creates a lot of tension. We need their money to do the work, but we have to jump through a lot of hoops to get that money. And it really like their metrics aren't always grounded in reality at all. Like their idea of success for the young people we work with is that they stay in the same placement for the next year after you connect them to services. Whereas when
placement means a place to live.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Placement means a place to live. Like when a young person is removed from their home and they have to go to a foster family for a period of time, or go to a group home if they have kind of escalating needs, that funder is like, great, you've connected them to services, they've got to stay put. Well, for a lot of these young people, that isn't their reality. That doesn't incorporate harm reduction principles, and we see success as like they come back. They leave, but they come back because there's a relationship there. And that's what we would view as success. But we have to try to communicate that to a funder, so it's difficult.
The opportunity we've talked about from a service design perspective is to be involved in the process, to co-define impact metrics, use our service design acumen in business to really support these organizations, to build new funding models, and to really think about how to better outline impact metrics so that the relationships with funders are more connected to the actual outcomes so that the work can progress the way it should.
So a lot of nonprofits, just like mine, really want to be grounded in the experience of the folks that they're trying to serve, or kind of the impact they're trying to make. And for a lot of nonprofits, that means going and asking a lot of questions and taking and never returning. And so we can't just take, and that only reinforces some of the harmful power dynamics, especially with the young people in the space we are in. Like their power, their autonomy has been fully taken away. And so instead of saying like, I have the power to change these things, no, like you're telling me some things, let's work and develop your advocacy skills and let's go do this together. But that also is difficult.
Because it's not integrated into the actual working of the organization usually, right? So most of these organizations that we've understood may have marketing teams, but they certainly don't have service design teams, right? So we're talking about how do we really integrate human-centric practices into the organization so that when it's time to write a grant, let's say, they already have the relationships, the understanding with the communities that they serve so that they can better co-create and work together with those communities in a really consistent way.
And one specific way Molly and her team have been helpful is, not just making a very pretty, effective toolkit, but also in kind of how we show up to spaces with young people and how we create spaces to make them more accessible. Like we're not just going into a listening session in a dry, sterile room, sitting across from kids and asking some questions. Like that's not going to work. And through some of the tools and facilitation techniques we've learned from Molly and her team, like the young people have really responded in very different ways. So much so that like all of the things that, we strive for, which is kind of advocating alongside of young people, them having the tools, them becoming the leaders of the movement, are actually happening.
This is the last one.
Yeah, the last one, and pretty obvious, nonprofits don't make a profit. So that, is something that you all should know. And while there are some nonprofits that, are very well funded, ACLU, Doctors Without Borders have, they're more well known. Organizations like ours and many others don't have a whole lot of funding. And so we have to do a lot with a very little. So we have to, my team is 4 people. We work all over the country. We pass laws. We lead like all of these things. We have to be super creative. We have to be super nimble. And we need to be able to translate what we're doing in a much more succinct way than I usually do to be able to make the impact we want to make more broadly.
we've heard this from Kate, but other folks we've worked with since in the organization, just, and this is something that is familiar to us in for-profit organizations as well. But here we're talking not just about sort of within the organization, inter-organization collaboration capacity. But as the toolkit suggested as well, this is about cross-organization collaboration, and we're talking about different types of organizations, right? And so the ability to collaborate, the ability to do that translation so that you can speak to different folks, get all types of, I think when we did our first audience map, we had maybe 20 different audiences that we were maybe trying to serve with this one toolkit, right? So there's a lot of potential for collaboration, and they've got a lot of other stuff to do, So leveling up their organizational capacity for collaboration is a great opportunity for service designers. Okay, so these are the three that we would say if you're thinking about doing that translation, these are ways to start to think about the opportunity in this space for service design. One second. And that QR code on the bottom that's been throughout the presentation will also take you to all of this and more resources. And we'll talk to that more in a second.
Smile, Molly.
Never on command. Okay. This work has changed me. Getting to know this space and also, being able to actually be one of the people that talks about it, that has the uncomfortable conversation, that spreads the word about the need for work in this space has been really important to me. And so, we'd like to encourage you to find a space to jump in. And we know that, this relationship was built off a personal one that I had, and we acknowledge that. So we wanted to sort of provide a tool to actually help you with a starting point for an introduction if it's something that is the barrier for you. How do I even start this conversation? So this QR code will take you to a letter, an intro letter that Kate and I have co-written. So it is Lawyer Service Design Speak. And
nonprofit, not just lawyer.
All right, sorry, you're right, sorry. Nonprofit service designer speak. Excuse me, that's right. And we'd encourage you to try it out, to start the conversations, and use the language that we've started to build to open up the opportunity to participate, because we think there's really important use of your skills out there, and we know that everyone here is really driven towards impact, and this is an amazing way to start to get involved.
And we're not encouraging you to just one day approach a nonprofit. Find something that's meaningful to you. Find something that pulls at your heartstrings, and understand how it's impacting people, the environment, whatever is pulling, and then do something about it. It really, I can tell you right now, without getting choked up, of course, that because we created this toolkit and because we provided some access to what we were learning in California, other communities across the country were able to jump in, kind of analyze what their statutory framework looked like, advocate alongside young people, do so in a way that wasn't tokenizing and harmful to the young people, and change the laws so that kids weren't sitting behind bars. It actually makes an impact. So please do it. I'll look you all up to see what you're doing in a couple of years.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, wow.